You think missing lunch is hard? They went 5 days without eating. No grocery stores. No delivery apps. Just endless sand, blazing sun, and the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs. Yet the Bedouins didn't just survive. They thrived where others would collapse from hunger. In the vast deserts of Arabia and North Africa, food wasn't guaranteed. Raids could steal your supplies. Sandstorms could bury your stores. Wells could run dry, forcing sudden detours that stretched journeys from days into weeks. When the unexpected struck, the difference between life and death wasn't luck. It was knowledge passed down through generations. The Bedouins understood something modern science is just beginning to grasp. The human body is designed to survive without food far longer than we think. But only if you know how to work with it, not against it. Picture this: a Bedouin caravan traveling from Damascus to Mecca. 300 kilometers of scorching sand. The journey should take 8 days with full supplies. But on day 4, disaster strikes. A rival tribe raids their camp at dawn, taking most of their food stores and scattering their animals. What remains? A handful of dates, some camel milk, and the clothes on their backs. For most people, this would be a death sentence. The human stomach starts growling after just 4 hours without food. After 12 hours, blood sugar drops. Weakness sets in. Panic follows. In the desert, panic kills faster than hunger. But these weren't most people. As the raiders disappeared over the dunes, the Bedouin leader didn't curse or despair. He gathered his people in a circle and spoke calmly. We have 4 days of walking ahead. We have enough water. We have enough strength. We will reach Mecca. How could he be so certain? Because Bedouin children learned to fast before they learned to ride. Not for religious reasons, for survival. They understood that hunger was not the enemy. Fear of hunger was the enemy. The human body stores roughly 1,500 to 2,000 calories in the liver and muscles as glycogen, enough energy for about a day of normal activity. After that runs out, the body has a backup system, fat reserves. Even a lean adult carries 50,000 to 100,000 calories stored as fat. That's enough energy to sustain life for weeks, if you know how to access it properly. But here's what most people don't realize. The switch from burning sugar to burning fat doesn't happen automatically. It requires training. The Bedouins had been conditioning their metabolisms since childhood through controlled fasting periods. Their bodies knew how to flip the metabolic switch smoothly, without the weakness and mental fog that hits unprepared people. Modern research calls this metabolic flexibility. When food is available, the body runs on glucose from carbohydrates. When food becomes scarce, it shifts to ketosis, burning fat for fuel instead. But this transition takes practice. For untrained bodies, the switch is rough. Energy crashes. Thinking becomes cloudy. Muscles feel weak. The Bedouins had no such problems. Their bodies moved seamlessly between fuel sources like a hybrid car switching between gas and electric power. They could walk for days on nothing but water and the energy stored in their own tissues. They also understood something crucial about desert psychology. Hunger is not an emergency. It's information. In our modern world, we've been trained to eat the moment we feel hungry. We panic at the first stomach growl. But hunger is just the body's way of saying food would be nice. Not food is urgently needed. The Bedouins learned to distinguish between hunger and starvation. True starvation, the point where the body begins breaking down vital organs, doesn't occur until weeks without food, provided water intake continues. Everything before that is just discomfort. Uncomfortable, yes. Dangerous, no. This mental framework was crucial for desert survival. When food ran low, there was no room for emotional eating, stress eating, or eating out of boredom. Every calorie had to be strategic. Every bite calculated. The body was treated like a precious machine that needed fuel only when truly necessary. Children growing up in Bedouin tribes learned to recognize the difference between mouth hunger and stomach hunger. Mouth hunger, the craving for taste, texture, the pleasure of eating, could be ignored. Stomach hunger, the deep, gnawing feeling that comes from genuine caloric need, required attention. But even then, the response was measured. Precise. Never more than necessary. This wasn't cruelty or deprivation. It was preparation for a world where abundance was rare and famine was common. Every Bedouin knew that someday, maybe many times in their life, survival would depend on their ability to function without food. So they practiced. Not by starving themselves, but by teaching their bodies and minds to be comfortable with less. When that raided caravan gathered in the sand, looking at their meager remaining supplies, they weren't afraid. They were ready. The adults had fasted for weeks during religious periods. The children had skipped meals during practice journeys. Everyone understood that the human body was designed for feast and famine cycles, not constant feeding. They divided their remaining food not into equal portions for each day, but into a strategic reserve. Most would be saved for the final push toward their destination, when energy reserves would be lowest. Some would be used to maintain morale during the hardest moments. But the majority of their journey would be fueled not by food, but by the energy their bodies had been storing and preparing to use. As the sun reached its peak and the sand began to burn, they settled into the rhythm that would carry them through. Minimal movement during the heat, steady progress during the cool hours, and absolute trust in their body's ability to sustain life long after the last date was eaten. Before every journey, Bedouin tribes followed a ritual that seemed almost counterintuitive. They ate less, not more. In the weeks leading up to long desert crossings, they gradually reduced their portions. Not to save food, but to train their bodies. This practice, now called intermittent fasting, conditioned their metabolism to switch efficiently between burning food and burning stored fat. Their bodies learned to operate on minimal fuel without the crashes, weakness, and mental fog that hit unprepared travelers. The preparation began a full month before departure. Bedouin families would shift from 3 meals a day to 2, then from 2 meals to 1. Not starvation, strategic conditioning. They were teaching their digestive systems to be comfortable with longer periods between eating. Their stomachs learned to stop sending panic signals after just a few hours without food. Children as young as 10 participated in this training, not because they were expected to survive major famines, but because desert life demanded metabolic flexibility. A sudden sandstorm could bury food supplies. An attack could scatter the herds. A dried well could force a 3-day detour. In the desert, the ability to function without immediate food wasn't a special skill. It was basic survival equipment. The adults understood the science, even without modern terminology. They knew that the first few days without food were always the hardest. The body fights the transition. It sends hunger signals. It creates cravings. It tries to conserve energy by making you tired and sluggish. But if you can push through that initial resistance, something remarkable happens. The hunger disappears. Energy returns. Mental clarity improves. Modern research confirms what the Bedouins discovered through experience. After 48 to 72 hours without food, the body completes its shift into ketosis. Fat cells begin releasing stored energy directly into the bloodstream. The brain, which normally runs exclusively on glucose, learns to run partially on ketones, a cleaner, more stable fuel source. Many people report feeling sharper and more focused during extended fasts than they do while eating regularly. But the Bedouins took their preparation beyond simple fasting. They carefully chose which foods to emphasize during the pre-journey conditioning period. Every bite was strategic. Dates weren't just sweet treats. They were survival capsules. Unlike refined sugar, which causes blood glucose to spike and crash, dates contain a complex mixture of fructose, glucose, and fiber. The fiber slows absorption, providing steady energy over hours instead of minutes. A single date contains about 20 calories, but those calories include potassium for muscle function, magnesium for nerve transmission, and antioxidants for cellular protection. During conditioning periods, Bedouins would often eat nothing but dates and water for entire days. This wasn't punishment. It was training their digestive systems to extract maximum nutrition from minimal input. Their bodies learned to process every vitamin, mineral, and calorie with perfect efficiency. Animal fat was another secret weapon. Modern nutrition often demonizes fat, but the Bedouins understood its value for long-term energy storage. Fat contains 9 calories per gram, compared to just 4 calories per gram for carbohydrates or protein. This means a small amount of fat could fuel the body for an entire day. They consumed clarified butter, cheese, and milk fat whenever possible during preparation phases. But not just any fat, specifically fats that were easy to digest and didn't require large amounts of water for processing. Protein, while nutritious, actually dehydrates the body during digestion as the kidneys work to eliminate nitrogen waste. In water-scarce environments, This made protein a luxury they couldn't always afford. The Bedouins also discovered the importance of salt balance during food restriction. When you stop eating, your kidneys begin flushing electrolytes more rapidly. Without proper mineral balance, even well-hydrated people can experience weakness, cramping, and confusion. So their pre-journey diet included small amounts of salt, often dissolved in water or sprinkled on dates. They paid careful attention to how different family members responded to food restriction. Older adults typically handled fasting better than young children, whose smaller bodies had less energy reserves. Pregnant and nursing women needed different protocols entirely. But even children learned age-appropriate versions of metabolic training, skipping breakfast, eating lighter dinners, learning to be comfortable with mild hunger. The mental preparation was equally important. Bedouin culture included stories, songs, and proverbs that normalized hunger as a temporary condition rather than an emergency. Children heard tales of legendary desert travelers who walked for days without food, arriving at their destination stronger and more focused than when they started. This psychological conditioning was crucial because hunger triggers powerful emotional responses. The modern world has trained us to interpret any stomach discomfort as an urgent problem requiring immediate attention. But the Bedouins learned to reframe hunger as information, not emergency. A growling stomach simply meant food would be welcome, not food is desperately needed. They also practiced what modern psychology calls delayed gratification in extreme forms. During abundant times, they would prepare elaborate meals and then wait hours before eating them. Not as punishment, but as mental training. They were teaching their minds that wanting food and needing food were different things entirely. The physical preparation included building up brown fat reserves, a special type of fat tissue that burns calories to generate heat. Unlike regular fat, which simply stores energy, brown fat actively burns stored calories to maintain body temperature. People with more brown fat can handle cold better and have more efficient metabolisms during food restriction. Bedouins developed brown fat through controlled exposure to temperature extremes. They would sleep without blankets on cool nights, work during slightly uncomfortable temperatures, and deliberately experience mild cold stress. This wasn't masochism, it was physiological optimization for survival conditions. By the time a Bedouin caravan was ready to depart, every member had a body trained for efficiency. Their metabolisms could switch fuel sources smoothly. Their digestive systems could extract maximum nutrition from minimal input. Their minds were comfortable with hunger as a temporary condition rather than a crisis. When food became scarce during the actual journey, these prepared bodies didn't panic. They simply activated systems that had been trained and tested for weeks. The transition from abundance to scarcity was smooth because it wasn't a transition at all. It was just another operational mode they had practiced until it became natural. When food ran out completely, the Bedouins didn't panic. They had a system. First rule, conserve every calorie your body already has. Movement was reduced to the absolute minimum. They traveled only in the coolest hours, dawn and dusk, when the body's energy demands were lowest. The moment supplies hit zero, everything changed. Not just what they ate, but how they moved, breathed, even thought. Every action was calculated against its caloric cost. Walking consumed roughly 300 calories per hour. Sitting still consumed about 80. The mathematics were brutal but simple. The less energy you burn, the longer your reserves last. Their daily schedule shifted to match energy conservation, not comfort. During the scorching midday hours, when temperatures soared past 45 degrees Celsius, they entered what modern researchers call metabolic suppression. Heart rate slowed. Breathing became shallow. They lay motionless under their tents, sometimes for 8 to 10 hours straight. This wasn't laziness, it was precision. The human body burns different amounts of energy depending on activity level. Sleeping burns about 50 calories per hour. Sitting quietly burns 70. Walking slowly burns 200. Running burns 600 or more. In the desert, with no food coming in, every calorie spent moving was a calorie that couldn't be used later for vital organ function. Movement patterns became ritualized. No sudden gestures. No unnecessary steps. When they needed to adjust position, they moved like elderly people, slowly, deliberately, conserving momentum. Even conversation was limited. Talking burns energy. Thinking burns energy. Everything that wasn't essential for immediate survival was postponed. But they didn't just lie there waiting to die. The Bedouins had developed sophisticated systems for desert travel during food scarcity. They moved in single file, following the lead camel's footprints to avoid the energy cost of breaking new trail through soft sand. They walked in the shadows of dunes whenever possible, even if it meant taking longer routes. Their timing was mathematical. Dawn travel began before sunrise, when the air was coolest and most humid. They would walk for 2 to 3 hours, covering maximum distance while their energy levels were highest and the temperature was lowest. Then, as the sun climbed and heat began radiating from the sand, they would find shade and enter conservation mode. Evening travel resumed not at sunset, but an hour before sunset, when the air began cooling but visibility remained good. They would walk until well after dark, guided by stars and the natural phosphorescence of certain desert landmarks. Night walking was slower but far more energy efficient than day walking. Water became even more critical than usual. Without food, dehydration happens faster because the body has no incoming moisture from fruits, vegetables, or other water-rich foods. But they couldn't afford to drink freely. Every drop had to serve multiple purposes. They sipped constantly, tiny amounts that kept the mouth moist and blood flowing, but never enough to trigger the kidneys to flush precious minerals. The goal wasn't to feel satisfied, but to maintain the bare minimum for organ function. A mouthful every 15 minutes rather than a full drink every hour. The water itself was treated strategically. Morning water was often slightly warmed by leaving it in sunlight for a few minutes. Warm water absorbs into the bloodstream faster than cold water, requiring less energy for digestion. Evening water was kept as cool as possible to help lower core body temperature and reduce caloric demands for internal cooling. They also knew which desert plants could help extend survival time. Prickly pear cactus pads, when carefully prepared to remove spines and bitter compounds, provided both moisture and a small amount of natural sugars. The fruit was even better, sweet, hydrating, and packed with vitamin C to prevent scurvy during extended periods without varied nutrition. Certain seeds and roots, when available, offered concentrated nutrition. Desert broom seeds could be ground into a paste that provided protein and healthy fats. Date palm heart, though rare and valuable, contained complex carbohydrates that released energy slowly over hours. But these were supplements, not meals, carefully rationed additions to extend survival time, not attempts to feel full. The psychological strategies were just as sophisticated as the physical ones. Hunger creates powerful mental effects: irritability, poor decision-making, obsessive thoughts about food, and eventually panic. In the desert, any of these could be fatal. A bad decision about direction could add days to a journey. Panic could lead to wasted energy or dangerous risk taking days. They developed mental disciplines to maintain clarity even as their stomachs remained empty. Meditation wasn't a luxury, it was a survival tool. They would spend hours in controlled breathing exercises that slowed metabolism and kept minds calm. Focused attention on the rhythm of breathing, the feeling of air moving in and out, the subtle sounds of wind and sand. Storytelling served multiple purposes. It distracted from hunger, preserved cultural knowledge, and used minimal physical energy while keeping minds active. But even the stories were chosen strategically. Tales of successful desert crossings, legendary travelers who survived against impossible odds, heroes who found strength through hardship rather than comfort. They also practiced what modern psychology calls cognitive reframing. Instead of thinking, "I'm starving and might die," they learned to think, "My body is using its stored energy exactly as it was designed to do." Instead of "I'm suffering," they thought, "I'm proving my strength." The physical reality was the same, but the mental framework transformed suffering into accomplishment. Group dynamics became crucial during food scarcity. Weak members could drag down the entire group, but abandoning people wasn't acceptable. So they developed systems for sharing the energy burden. Stronger individuals would carry extra weight. Experienced navigators would make route decisions to minimize energy expenditure for everyone. Leadership rotated to prevent any single person from bearing the full mental load of decision-making while food-deprived. They even had protocols for managing different hunger phases. The first 24 hours were often the most difficult psychologically. The body was still expecting regular meals and sending strong hunger signals. Days 2 and 3 were physically challenging as the body transitioned between fuel sources. But after day 4, if they had successfully entered ketosis, many people reported feeling clearer and more energetic than they had while eating normally. This wasn't magic or willpower. It was biology working exactly as evolution had designed it. For most of human history, regular access to food was rare. Our bodies evolved sophisticated systems for thriving during feast and famine cycles. The Bedouins simply knew how to activate and manage those systems deliberately rather than fighting against them. What the Bedouins discovered through necessity, modern medicine now confirms. The human body can survive 30 to 40 days without food if water intake continues. After about 72 hours without eating, the body shifts into ketosis, burning stored fat instead of glucose for energy. But here's where Bedouin wisdom went deeper than basic survival. They understood that starvation affects the mind before the body. Hunger creates anxiety, poor decision-making, and panic, all potentially fatal in the desert. Their cultural practices included meditation, storytelling, and focused breathing that kept mental clarity sharp even as the stomach remained empty. Modern science has revealed the remarkable sophistication of what the Bedouins achieved through generations of practical experience. When food intake stops, the human body doesn't simply begin shutting down. It activates an entirely different operating system that was designed by evolution for exactly these circumstances. Within the first 12 hours without food, the body depletes its immediate glucose reserves stored in the liver and muscles. Most people start feeling hungry around this point because they've been trained to eat every few hours. But for the Bedouins, this was just the beginning of a well-understood process. Between 12 and 24 hours, the body begins breaking down stored glycogen, a form of glucose that's packed away in liver and muscle tissue. This provides enough energy to maintain normal function for about a day. During this phase, the Bedouins knew to expect mild hunger, but no significant weakness. They planned their most demanding travel during this window when energy levels remained high. The critical transition happens between 24 and 72 hours. This is when the body begins shifting from burning glucose to burning fat for fuel. Modern researchers call this state ketosis. The liver begins converting fatty acids into molecules called ketones that can fuel the brain and other organs. For people who haven't trained their metabolisms, this transition can cause weakness, mental fog, irritability, and strong food cravings. But the Bedouins had prepared for this phase through months of conditioning. Their bodies could make the metabolic switch smoothly, without the uncomfortable symptoms that hit unprepared people. They understood that this transition period required extra rest and minimal physical demands. Most of their movement during this phase happened during the coolest parts of the day, and they spent long hours in meditative rest. After 72 hours, something remarkable happens. The hunger pangs that plagued the first few days often disappear completely. Mental clarity can actually improve beyond normal levels. Energy becomes stable rather than fluctuating with meal times. This is because ketones, the fuel molecules produced from fat burning, provide a cleaner, more consistent energy source for the brain than glucose. The Bedouins had names for these different phases and adjusted their behavior accordingly. They knew that day 1 and 2 would be mentally challenging, but physically manageable. Day 3 would be the hardest, the body's transition day, when energy might feel low and mood could become unstable. But if they could push through day 3, day 4 often brought renewed strength and sharp mental focus. They also recognized individual variation in how people responded to food restriction. Older adults, who typically carried more fat reserves, often handled extended fasting better than young people with faster metabolisms. Women seemed to transition more smoothly than men, possibly due to evolutionary adaptations for pregnancy and nursing. But even children could be trained to handle short-term food scarcity if they were gradually conditioned. The Bedouins understood something that modern medicine is just rediscovering: autophagy. This is the body's process of cleaning out damaged cells and regenerating new ones. During food restriction, when the body isn't busy digesting new food, it can focus energy on cellular maintenance and repair. Many Bedouins reported feeling healthier and more energetic after periods of controlled fasting than they had during times of abundant eating. But they also recognized the dangers that modern people often ignore. Extended fasting affects electrolyte balance. Without proper mineral intake, even well-hydrated people can experience dangerous heart rhythm problems, muscle weakness, and confusion. The Bedouins managed this through careful attention to salt balance, and by consuming small amounts of mineral-rich foods when available. They knew which warning signs meant they were approaching true starvation rather than manageable hunger. Swollen joints, persistent dizziness, inability to concentrate, and changes in urine color all indicated that the body was beginning to break down vital tissue rather than just using fat reserves. At that point, even small amounts of food had to be found, even if it meant taking significant risks. The refeeding process was perhaps where Bedouin knowledge was most crucial. After days without food, the digestive system essentially shuts down. The stomach shrinks. Enzyme production decreases. The intestines become sensitive. Eating too much too quickly when food becomes available can cause violent illness or even death, a condition modern medicine calls refeeding syndrome. Bedouins broke fasts gradually, starting with small sips of milk or a single date, slowly rebuilding tolerance over hours or days. They knew that the body needed time to restart its digestive processes. The first meal after extended fasting was never a feast, even when abundant food was available. It was a careful, measured process of awakening sleeping systems. They understood that the stomach would feel full after just a few bites, even though the body still needed significant nutrition. So they ate small amounts frequently rather than trying to consume normal-sized meals. They prioritized easy-to-digest foods: milk, dates, thin broths. Heavy proteins and complex foods were avoided until the digestive system had time to fully reactivate. The psychological aspects of refeeding were just as important. After days without food, the mind could become obsessed with eating. Some people wanted to consume everything available immediately, fearing that scarcity would return. Others lost their appetite entirely, unable to feel hungry even when their bodies desperately needed nutrition. Bedouin culture included specific rituals and social structures that managed these psychological challenges. Returning food was celebrated, but in controlled ways. Stories were told about successful desert crossings and the strength that came from surviving hardship. The experience of surviving without food was framed as an accomplishment and proof of human resilience rather than trauma to be forgotten. The desert taught them that survival isn't about having more resources. It's about using fewer. In a landscape where abundance was rare and scarcity was normal, the Bedouins mastered the art of thriving on nothing, turning emptiness itself into strength. Their bodies became precision instruments, calibrated not for comfort, but for endurance. Where others saw impossible conditions, they found a way to make the human machine run longer, leaner, and more efficiently than anyone thought possible. They proved that the limits we accept in modern life are often just the boundaries of our own inexperience, not the boundaries of human capability.